This is the North Georgia Life Podcast. Embrace life where you live. Welcome back to the North Georgia Life Podcast. We are at Project Chimps. Project Chimps is in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And first of all, if you've not been to the Blue Ridge area, it is gorgeous. It's called Blue Ridge for a reason. Rolling hills, mountain views, all the feels of the North Georgia mountains. We kind of joke about it in the podcast, but do not speed going to Blue Ridge. You will get a ticket. I can guarantee you there are cops everywhere, highways, byways, it doesn't matter. So all the locals are just laughing right now, nodding their heads because they know. And if you're coming to town and this is a special weekend for you or whatever, just avoid the blue lights and lay off the accelerator a little bit. You're welcome. Project Chimps is a wildlife sanctuary for chimpanzees who have been retired from medical research. And we talk about this in the episode, but the medical research has been done away with for years now. But there are a number of chimpanzees who are still effectively free prisoners, captives, if you will, in the medical facilities that they were tested in because there's nowhere for them to go. And this is one of the most unique properties. It is unlike anywhere that I've ever been. And it almost feels a little bit, we kind of laugh about it a little bit in the episode, that you're walking around like part of Jurassic Park because you have these incredible, fences and walls and everything like that. And you're hearing sounds that sound like you're in the middle of a jungle, but you're in Blue Ridge. It was just one of the neatest experiences. So I had my sister in town for the weekend, and my wife and my son, we went and kind of did our little tour before the episode. And I don't even know that I can put it into words just how neat it was to be able to just look through the observation windows, just see them hanging out, see them gathering together. You just kind of wonder what they're doing. And if you're going on a tour and if you have kids, this was just my little, they were kind of standing off in the distance, maybe 40, 50 yards, not real far, but somewhere in that range. And I had my son with me, and we were hoping that they were going to come over to the windows and just kind of say hi. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But I had the thought, chimpanzees, gorillas, monkeys, I think all of them, everybody in that genus, species, whatever the science word is, I think they all carry their young on their back or some of them on the back. And so I put Walker, our son, on my back. No joke, within about 30 seconds of me going up to the window with my son on my back, one of them started walking over to the window and got right up to us on the window. I mean, inches from our face, and just not an experience or a life context that I can give you that kind of picture of how neat and cool an experience that was. One of those things we'll never forget as long as we live. And it is 1000% the reason we started the podcast 4 or 5 years ago, because there are hidden gems like this all over North Georgia. Certainly, this is the only one that is like it. And everybody I talked to about the podcast when we were in the process of trying to line this up schedule-wise had no idea, had never heard of it. And if you can tell, I'm still, this is now a week or two after having done the tour, just amazed, excited. I can't wait to share the story with you. You know how to find the podcast online at Facebook, Instagram. Podcast is available on pretty much every platform you would listen to podcasts. North Georgia Life Podcast at gmail.com if you've got suggestions on future episodes. And the only ask we have in all of what we do in the podcast, because everything we do is free, is would you share it with someone who loves the area, wants to know more about the area, wants to get plugged in, wants to find places to volunteer or plan a great long weekend or anything like that. Just share the podcast with them. That's it. And bonus, if I needed to give you a bonus, when we got done the tour, everybody was kind of hungry. maybe a little hangry, and maybe some people got snapped at and the navigating around the town of Blue Ridge. But we stopped at Sue's, which Sues, like short for Susan's. We stopped at Sue's for lunch after we got done the tour. Shout out to Sue's. Phenomenal hamburgers, like old school hamburgers, but not like super, greasy, not like that, but had the checkered wax paper. Like it's that restaurant. And it was so good. The burgers were so good, but like surprisingly, my wife ordered the fried pickles, and they were fried pickle spears, and it actually had like a good, like a tempura batter on it. Like maybe like a tempura and a panko mix. I don't know. I was blown away at how good they were. Get yourself a great burger. It's just on the outskirts of downtown Blue Ridge, and just on one of the side streets. So that's it. Free plug for Sue's. Great job, Sue's. And with that, we'll get started at Project Chimps. The North Georgia Life Podcast, Jake, your host. So if you listen to prior episodes in 2024, I told you we had some awesome outdoor things coming up. This is one of them. We have had to reschedule a couple times just because, life gets busy. And if I stutter, it's because I'm so excited. We are at Project Chimps with Allie Crumpacker. Allie is the executive director of Project Chimps. We are located just on the outskirts of Blue Ridge, Georgia, which is obviously a beautiful drive no matter where you're from, whether you're from Blue Ridge or not. It is a gorgeous, relaxing drive. However, do not speed because there are cops hiding everywhere. But Project Chimps is a sanctuary for chimps. And you may be able to hear some of them in the background. There is possibly a skirmish going over on someone's favorite blanket. We don't know exactly, but if you hear the background noise, that is not a soundtrack. Those are actual chimps on site. And Allie, I know you've got a super busy day. We're getting ready for the weekend, so thanks for your time. We just finished a tour, so Jake is like on cloud 9, maybe 10 and a half. First of all, give us a little bit of your this is such a unique property. This is, I told you when we first got here, this is 1000% part of the reason that I started the podcast, because there are so many hidden treasures in North Georgia. I have had a conversation with probably a half dozen people in the last month or two about doing this podcast, and they're like, there's a chimp, what, where? Like in Georgia? I'm like, this is why we do the podcast. So how did you, give us kind of your genesis of like, where did you come from? How did you find your way here to Blue Ridge? And we'll kind of fill in some of the pieces along the way.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the podcast today, because you're right, it is a hidden secret. Despite the noise in the background there, even some of our neighbors will say, after a year or two, I've been hearing these sounds and I just didn't know what was there, because for whatever reason, they didn't know how to use Google. But Project Chimps has been here now since 2015 is when we bought the property. The organization was created in 2014, so it is our 10-year anniversary. We're very excited to be celebrating. And we were founded specifically to provide a forever home to chimpanzees that were retiring from medical research. Now, thankfully, the laws changed in 2015, and it is no longer legal to use chimps in medical research. But when those laws passed, over 700 chimpanzees were living here in the United States in laboratories. And most people don't even realize that, even now, to this day.
Yeah.
And there was not already places, there wasn't enough zoos or sanctuaries for all 700 chimps to go. And sadly, there are still chimps living in those labs. They're not being used on research anymore, but there's still no place for them to go. So we were formed then, and we've been working diligently since then to refurbish this property, which used to be a gorilla sanctuary, as I told you on our tour earlier. And if any of your listeners come for a tour, we will explain all of that to them too about the gorilla sanctuary past. But for the chimps, we've been able to now offer our home to over 100 of them. We have 95 currently. Obviously, some have since passed away since they've been here. But there are dozens of other chimps that we are still hoping to bring here to introduce them to the lovely Blue Ridge Mountains for their retirement life.
And so the property itself here is 230 acres. The chimpanzees are housed in approximately I don't say housed, they live in approximately how much of that acreage?
So the chimps right now have 6 acres, but I also showed you that expansion area. So coming in 2 weeks, we will be opening that up. So they're going to have a total of 8 acres that they can explore in their different family groups. So all 95 chimps are not in one giant group. They have different family groups, different pods, and we rotate who goes into each yard, and that's really stimulating for them. They did not have yards at the lab, and even though they've been here for a long time, we actually still have a few chimps that do not go outside. So for those chimps, we have flat screen TVs and nature documentaries and fun cartoons that they get to watch inside to entertain them for the day. But for everyone else, they're getting a chance to go outside, visit the neighbors, yell at the neighbors, tease the neighbors, whatever it is that they want to do with their neighbors. And then they go back home to their family at night and I'm sure gossip about it over dinner. And then the next day we rotate who's outside again. So that's part of the way we stimulate their lives. And it's not, we're just not able to replicate, right, what they would have in the wild with like 50 miles to cover.
Right.
I can only give them 6 acres, 6 or 8 acres. So we change it up with what's out there.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you came here from San Diego. Did you go to school for this? Like, what is how did you find your way into such a unique, I don't say business, a unique realm? Did you have like a passion for animals when you were growing up?
I did. I grew up on a small farm. We had horses and goats and chickens and things like that. And animals was just always definitely the thing I was going to do. I started my career just like most in this career field in shoveling poop. I shoveled elephant and rhino poop at Safari in New Jersey.
Different.
Yep.
And that was where in New Jersey?
At a Six Flags Safari in New Jersey.
Okay.
When I was 17, that's how I got started. And along the way, I eventually got my master's degree in zoologic administration, which is a very niche degree.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is like an MBA, but specifically for a business that has a living collection. And I found my way into wildlife rehab first and then sanctuary from there. So yes, I was out in San Diego before here, wrapped up a capital build and program development program out at that facility. And I was looking for my next project. And I too did not know that there was a chimpanzee sanctuary in North Georgia, but I was in San Diego, so it made more sense that I didn't know about it. But I moved out here 7 years ago and been here ever since. Love the mountains, love the serenity of it, like you were saying. When I have to go down to Atlanta, usually just to use the airport, I can feel the weight just drift away as I drive away from the city and up into the wilderness here. And then
that is a great descriptor because that is exactly... Yes.
Yeah, you can it melts off, right? It just melts off. We have this property here in Blue Ridge that it was available to us to make this home for the chimps. And the community has been absolutely amazing at embracing us. We have 150 volunteers that are with us on a regular basis.
Wow.
And some of those are second homeowners that come down from Atlanta or Florida. So they're only here seasonally. We actually have volunteers that fly in and just do like a set week at a time. You can look that up at our Chimpcation program. So you like combine chimpanzees with your vacation. And it's just amazing that we have all of these local retirees that are now giving back to our fellow primate retirees.
That's fantastic. So was just on your San Diego project, was it similar to this?
I worked with in San Diego. We're primarily apex predator native wildlife species like black bears, mountain lions, bobcats, things like that. But the concept of running the organization was the same. We still had to improve our fundraising strategies, improve our volunteer procedures, create an internship program, which I did there as well as here. Because it's really about building the pipeline also for future folks like myself, right? And making sure that there is a way into the career field to on what you want to do with it. Do you want to be a behavior coordinator and help work with the chimps on a daily basis to help them with their own medical care? Do you want to go into the veterinary field and do the actual medical work? Or are you really, like myself, passionate about animals, but more inclined to do the administrative side and focus on spreadsheets and the human end of it in developing our team?
Yeah. And all of which are equally necessary
Absolutely,
to make it run smoothly. And that's from the volunteer base. You said you had 40 some staff?
About 42 employees, 150 volunteers, and then our summer internships start next week, and there's 6 of them coming for that.
Wow. So not your roadside petting zoo operation or anything remotely close to it.
Yeah, definitely not on the roadside, definitely no petting. We, as I was explaining to you on our tour, we work in protected contact. So that means even my staff that have been doing this for 30 years, multiple facilities who have a master's degree in primate behavior, do not touch the chimps when they are awake, ever. Not even a little bit. So we work with a safety barrier between us. If you go to any of our social media pages, you can find some photos of us on the inside. Those are not cages that keep the chimps in. Those are cages that keep the people out. That is how we look at it. That is our safety barrier, that my team can deliver medication to the chimps, look over their their tooth wounds if we need to. Most of the chimps will actually open their mouth and let us film their teeth so that we can send that to a local dentist.
Wow.
And that way everything can be hands off until we have to be hands on.
Yeah.
And in order to be hands on, we do have to use sedatives because chimps are very strong. And even though they've been raised by people and around humans their entire life, they're unpredictable, and even with good intent, they could still hurt us. So we sedate them first before we enter their space. Then we do whatever is medically necessary for their well-being, and then wake them up after we've exited the space and resecured.
I'm curious, was there in your background from going from the farm, growing up to Six Flags to, getting your master's and those sorts of things, was there that one moment or that one day as I do these interviews with various people, like some people have that day I knew this was like my thing, and I just, maybe found my lane or knew I just needed to find my lane. Was there that like eureka moment in your life, or was it just like this is a natural progression because of maybe your background or kind of where you grew up?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think I've thought about it specifically like that. It definitely seemed like a natural progression, but I reflect very fondly on my very first position at Six Flags, the safari park. Because I was only 17 when I started there, I actually wasn't allowed to shovel the elephant poop until I turned 18, because that's a requirement. So my very first position was actually as a tour guide, and I gave 7 one-hour tours every day, 5 days a week. Yes.
What?
A lot of talking. And I had to have a lot of knowledge. We had 1,200 animals there, about 130 species. And I had to know something about all those animals because you never knew what was going to happen on each of the individual tours on any given day. And I loved that. I loved just having this Bible that was with me that I could quickly fact check things if I was being asked a very specific question about the Ebok or the whatever camels that were in front of us at the moment. And I think that really gave me a sense of where I wanted to be in the human realm of working with animals, more so than doing the direct animal care. I find that I really like when I can see the light bulb come on, whether it's a child or an adult, particularly meeting a chimp for the first time, like your family did today.
Yeah.
When Luke came over and made that special moment of just hanging out with us and making eye contact. It can create such a new understanding for a non-human animal, a different type of species, and you can see their intelligence. And not everybody can see that in the eye of a snake or a lizard. But once you start seeing it in, say, a chimpanzee or an orangutan, and then you go back to your family dog and you look at them a little bit differently, and then you go visit the local zoo, you might see those animals in a different way now. And then maybe one day you're going to come across that garter snake in the garden and you're going to go, hey, friend.
Yeah.
Nice life.
Yep. That was, you're 6 inches from seeing 6 protected inches from seeing the actual, wrinkles on the hand of an animal you've never been that close to. Just really, really cool. From a like when you got here, you've been here
7 years.
7 years. From when you've got here to kind of where you are now, what's the thing or the things that you're most excited about, most proud of? And then just kind of from here in the next few years, just kind of some of those next steps. You mentioned some of the expansion areas for the chimps. Quote, inside the park, outside the park, organizationally, what are some of those things as far as the growth of an organization and an operation that you're looking forward to and that you're excited about having come from?
Yeah, my passion, as I mentioned, has been working with the people to teach them how to work with the animals. And when I first got here 7 years ago, they were only allowing volunteers to work in the kitchen cutting up produce, which is still a very needed job. I mean, we have 95 chimps to make meals for, and they eat 6 to 7 pounds of produce every day. So it's a lot of peeling, chopping, weighing out, measuring, and labeling. So it is a very crucial volunteer role. But I came from a background of using volunteers for everything. And I mean everything: graphic design, copy editing, obviously working outreach events and teaching other people that we exist, but right down to learning how to do the behavior work besides the behavior coordinator, because they need support too. Most of my medical team are volunteers. We have a veterinarian that oversees every procedure, but then we bring in a volunteer cardiologist, a volunteer dermatologist. We have a volunteer that runs our anesthesia machine because they are licensed professionals in those fields. And as a nonprofit, it is of course very crucial that I watch every single donor dollar and stretch it to its nth degree. So we can find volunteers that have a passion and a skill level and can offset something that I would otherwise have to spend funds on. It allows us to fast track our mission. So by developing our wonderful volunteer coordinator, Catherine Durham, who has then brought in, these 150 plus volunteers and keeps them motivated and going and continues to do orientation to backfill vacancies as people move on to other projects. It's really that volunteer core that brings new ideas, new creative, new passion, and then you've now created an army of spokespeople because they're all out at their personal family gatherings or their other opportunities that they're seeking socially and talking about the amazing thing that they just did for the chimps.
Yeah, and it's hard, when you're at the family Thanksgiving table, it's kind of hard to compete with, I just came from making Thanksgiving for the chimpanzees.
Chimpsgiving. It's Chimpsgiving. Yep.
I mean, you pretty much, that's the, that's like the, if you ever watch the comedian Brian Regan, where he talks about, I walked on the moon. Yeah, you pretty much win that, that table discussion.
Right.
The years coming up, just kind of pick your, what we got the next year, 5 years, 10 years from now. You mentioned the lifespan of the chimpanzee testing is over and outlawed, but the chimpanzees are, that you have here are going to continue to live for decades.
Correct.
I mean, you pick the time frame of just some of the things that you guys have going on, want to have going on, just any of that.
Sure. So there are still dozens of chimps living in a lab that we would like to relocate here as funding allows, as we're able to create space for them. You saw the 2 acres that we're about to open up to extend their opportunities to explore the yards. We would very much like to build another one of those. Chimpanzee housing is not available on Chewy.com, unfortunately. So we have to design and build all of this from scratch, which requires a lot of reinforcement because you saw their strength.
Certainly.
Yeah. So a lot of concrete, a lot of steel. And so each of those new yards is costing $1 million.
Wow.
So that's a lot of fundraising. I am happy to take check, card, Venmo. I mean, any sort of payment would be great. And the more that we can increase their yard access, I can actually bring more chimps into that same group and build the family. And larger families is more natural for them. In the wild, they would be living in a family group of 50 to 150. And my groups here are 13 to 19 members right now. So I could increase our overall population, get more chimps out of the lab up here to the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, if the funding continues to come in to help us make those expansion projects, but also to continue their lifetime care, like you mentioned. My youngest chimp here is only 11 years old. And I have several 11-year-olds, and they're going to live until their 50s or 60s. So we have to make sure that we are setting up for success for the decades to come, which means my current staff are going to eventually retire. So we have to have that pipeline of interns coming in and learning how to be care staff, and that we continue to educate the public on why this is beneficial both to the chimps but also to the community.
Yeah, and in case you're picking up the rain, that is rain. We have that in the spring in Georgia. We're sitting outside just because it's a beautiful spring day, and the rain thankfully has knocked out most of the pollen in the air. From your time here so far, and I say this every time I do an episode like this, and I know it's an unfair question, and I ask it every time anyway.
Okay.
Favorite memory, best story, funniest moment, like anything that's just one of your natural highlights you go to that just brings a smile to your face when you think about it.
The first one is easy. Most memorable moment, and it's going to take a little bit of backstory. So again, the chimps are at the lab. They don't have the access to a yard. They've seen the outdoors, but they have never walked on grass, travel on concrete. That's what they're used to on the floor. So the very first time that we bring any new group of chimps here and we open that door for the first time into our yard, what you saw was like the forested, landscaped, grassed, mud, clay, all of it with ants and wasps and all that goes with it. That is scary. They're really not sure what to do with that, right? And it is ingrained in my memory so hard about Harriet. And she was a young teenage chimp at the time on her first day outside with her group. Other group members ran out, adrenaline rush, yelling and screaming like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to go explore. And she was a more timid chimp who came later on, and she's clinging to the door. And she's still safely on the concrete, and she's got the metal square door around her, and she's clinging to it. And she's just staring at the ground, and she's like poking it to see if it's going to bite her, or if it's going to hurt, or is it going to hold her. And then she finally puts her knuckles down and realizes, okay, I can walk on this. And then she just started walking.
Wow.
And you could just see that whole process going on in her mind, or, you know, you could imagine what the process was going on in her mind of, is this safe? Are these humans that I think I like tricking me?
Right.
Like, what's going to happen if I touch this green stuff that I've never been allowed to touch it before? I thought it was because it was dangerous.
Wow.
And then another one that stands out for me is Haley, because Haley she's a prankster. I personally don't have a lot of opportunity to go inside their houses because it's just not a space that I'm useful for. I'm not feeding them or giving them medications, but sometimes I will go through for different reasons. And Haley has decided that anytime she sees me, she must try to spit water in my face. And she's very good at, you know, spotting me coming a long ways off. And I have, you know, everybody knows that this is her game. And again, I don't see her very often. She doesn't have this opportunity very frequently, but she goes and fills up her cheek with water from the water fountain. We call it a Lixit. And then she'll try to follow me around until she thinks that I'm in the right range. So I will usually have to talk to whoever with my back turned to Haley. But if I even so much as start to turn my head over my shoulder and she can see my cheek, she is aiming for it, and she laughs the way a chimp laughs if she succeeds in splashing me with spit.
That may be the greatest story. That may be the greatest, like, what is your memorable moment? Like, Haley, the chimpanzee, that stores water and waits for me to have that moment of unawareness, and then I get water cannoned in the face.
Yep.
That is hilarious. I want to move on, but I remembered a question that I was so curious to ask, just because, like, all of this, I mean, when people come here, it for us, when we walked in, I said it a couple times when we're walking around, like, you feel like you're walking around Jurassic Park.
Right.
Because you have the fences, it's so natural. Like, you're just in the Blue Ridge Mountains, in the woods, and then you just open up and you see, you know, their sanctuary play areas or whatever, everything. You got a nice gravel road. You got some old kind of historic looking buildings, properties on here. So everything looks, you've got a really cool tree stump that's got chimpanzees carved into it. So it's very surreal just coming here, your first 5 minutes here for the first time. What was your first day like here?
My very first day, wow. So thinking back 7 years ago, we only had 3 groups of chimps at the time when I first got here. There was 12 employees and 6 volunteers.
Wow.
No interns. So it was quieter. There was a lot less activity going on. It was easier to recognize all the chimps because there were only 31, I believe, at the time. And yeah, it's weird waking up, because I actually lived on the property when I first got here. So I had a place to land moving from California. And you would wake up and you would hear the crickets and the whippoorwillow and then a chimpanzee. You're like, this is weird. This is just, this doesn't, my brain is still not making sense of like what's happening right now.
Yeah, that would be weird. I want to hit real quick on your internship program. Sure. Because for people listening, you have kids in school and college, you know, coming into high school. They love animals. They want to, maybe they just, you know, this is kind of like an area of interest. They haven't found their calling, and they could be, you know, basically, like, they could be a business major kind of person. They don't have to be going into pre-med or biology to become a vet. Like, there's paths where this would be something that they would really love, that they would thrive in, just from their natural wiring and gifting. Take us a little bit through, what does the internship application look like? How far out do you start looking at interns for each year? Is it just summer? Do you do year round, like any of those things?
Yeah, it's year round. And while we do have set semesters, we'll work with any applicant on dates that work for them. Because we do have international students as well as second career students. So somebody who long ago out of college and they're not ready to retire, but they want to they always wanted to work with animals or do an animal thing. We work with them too. So we ask for a 12-week commitment. And if they're coming on site, we provide on-site housing. We're sitting on the porch, actually, of our intern housing. So they live here dormitory style. So they too can wake up weirdly to crickets and chimpanzees all at the same time. But yeah, the biology, pre-med, behavior studies, blog writing, graphic design. We've had art majors. We have a 2-acre farm on the property where we raise produce for the chimps. So we also will look for folks that are into permaculture and sustainable farming practices just to keep that up and running. And then we've had event interns, website design interns. So we'll pretty much find a niche for everyone. They do receive a stipend to help with food allowances and such. And our volunteers are absolutely fantastic at coordinating activities locally for the interns on their days off to go hiking or down to the Bigfoot Museum or some of the other local attractions on their days off. But our interns are super special. We've hired on staff about 20% of our interns post. They typically leave us and have to go back and finish school and graduate. But when a vacancy comes up, we're always eager to put one of our interns at the top of the list for that position.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Events, things that you have coming up, ways for people to get involved, sponsor things, like different levels of engagement in terms of, one-time visit tour to I want to be a permanent part of helping this in whatever way I can.
So volunteer applications are open all the time. You just go to our website, to the volunteer tab, put in an application. There's orientations every single month, so you can get involved that way. Private tours are available just about every single day. You can't just show up and buy a ticket and knock on our door and ask to see the monkeys. We don't have any monkeys.
We don't have monkeys, right?
No monkeys. So that's always fun conversation to have. But on our website, you can find group tours for private tour bookings. And those can be a little bit expensive, so we understand that. So we also host different event weekends. And we have one coming up on May 18th and 19th called Discovery Days. We have it annually. And ticket prices are $15 for a kid, $35 for an adult. You'll select a specific tour slot, but you can come for the whole day, hang out by the koi pond. There will be a food truck here. There will be some other vendors and exhibitors that you can explore while you're, before or after your tour to see the chimps.
You've got hiking trails on property.
Yeah, exactly. There's 6 miles of hiking trails that you can use dawn to dusk. We just ask for a donation on the honor system in our parking lot for that. The gift shop is, of course, open just about every day, 10 to 3. So you can come visit that. But, for those that might be listening further away, we have our Chimpcation program. So you can combine chimps with your vacation. That's on our website as well. And just follow along on social media and see what's happening, what's going on. We will occasionally host events in Atlanta. We do not bring the chimps with us. Sorry. But we will host different benefits and fundraisers around town and all the way down in Atlanta, sometimes even out of state. And you can learn all about what we do and then hopefully plan to come up and see the chimps yourself.
Yeah. How far out is a safe distance from Discovery Days for someone if they're like, oh my gosh, I want to go?
We will typically still have walk-up tickets, so even on the day of, it's one that you might have to wait a bit.
Don't plan for the day of. Do it in advance.
Definitely book in advance, but there will usually be some no-shows, so we can slip you into a walk-up ticket. If you miss Discovery Days, our next big event will be Chimp Retreat, which always sells out in advance. So that one you definitely have to buy tickets for. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is trick-or-treating around the chimpanzees. And it is the chimpanzees' favorite weekend of all time because they love kids and they absolutely love costumes. So the combination of the two things together is amazing. And we participate in the Teal Pumpkin Project. So kids can actually be signed up to not get any candy whatsoever and still have a full bag of treats at the end of the tour. It will just all be non-edibles. Yeah, they are glued to the windows the entire weekend. They run and get their lunch when it's lunchtime and come back and picnic at the windows because they want to see the blinky things. They want to see the flashy things. They want to see all the weird stuff, the masks, the headbands, and all of it.
That's awesome. And that is when again?
It's always the weekend before Halloween.
The weekend before Halloween.
It's always during the day, so it's great for even the littlest kids and the weirdest costumes because you can see everything.
Awesome. One question I like to do before the end of every episode is called the lightning round, which is a question that has nothing to do with anything. However, this is just my curiosity, and it is related to what you do. The favorite unsuspecting treat that the chimpanzees like. So most people think just monkeys and bananas kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do they have a...
Their absolute diehard favorite is onions.
Onions?
Raw onions.
No.
They get onions 3 times a week because it is their favorite. And then when we feed them their produce, it's always in a mixture. So it might be onions, kale, and green beans. They're going to go for the onions first. It might be onions, broccoli, sweet potatoes, onions first. Every time. No,
Is that
hands
like
down.
in the wild too? They just, like chimpanzees love onions?
I'm not really sure. They're not really prone to digging. So, onions being a root vegetable, it might be a little bit more rare for them to get that. They would be more inclined to do things like figs that they can pull out of a tree in the wild on that sweeter side. And a lot of our produce is sweeter than you would find in the wild. So even onions are on the sweet side compared to a wild onion. But they love onions.
In 1,000 years, I never would have guessed onions. I was thinking like, orange or an apple or,
Nope.
if you organic mushroom or marshmallows or something,
Give them the choice between an apple, an orange, and an onion. They will ask for the onion.
There you go. We have all become smarter in the chimpanzee delicacy world. For people who want to find out more about you, do any of the chimps have social media? Or any of the chimps on Instagram?
Not as individuals, no. Yeah. It's Project Chimps for the handle across all social media, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, and of course our website is projectchimps.org. And you can find all the different ways to buy tickets, get involved, volunteer, donate, sponsor a chimp.
Website, best place for getting directly in touch. But if you want to follow Facebook, Instagram, Project Chimps.
Yep.
I don't want to leave. So I'm like, man, am I ready for a second career internship? Maybe. Thank you so much for your time. This
Absolutely.
has been, and thank you for the tour. This was, if you are, even if you're not in Georgia, I think it was your marketing person or whoever we met, Holly. She said you have visitors from out of the country that come for this.
Yep.
And if you're here in Georgia and you're like, had no idea, like, this is why we do the podcast, and you will not be let down by coming here. One, like we said, it's a gorgeous drive. It's a beautiful property, and it is such a unique, it's one of the things that I love about operations like this. There's nothing quite like this, but it's much more personal, kind of intimate, if I can use that, from a setting perspective, than going to zoo. Mm-hmm. So we will be talking about this for a long, long time. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
This is the North Georgia Life Podcast. Embrace life where you live.